A deaf man was recently arrested at the Reagan National Airport because he was suspected of stealing an iPad. The only issue is this homeless Ethiopian man was deaf. And so as a result, he was thrown into prison, or jail, I should say, and he wasn't given an interpreter so he could actually communicate with the officials. At least that's what he's alleging in a lawsuit that he has filed against the officials and the jail that he was held in. He was held in the Arlington County Jail. Now, the suit alleges that Abraham was held for more than 24 hours before he knew why he had been arrested. So he didn't even know why he was arrested. He was administered a tuberculosis shot without his consent, often went hungry because he couldn't hear alerts for mealtime, and was unable to call friends or an attorney because of inadequate technology in the jail, all of which violated the Americans with Disabilities Act. So he tried to motion to them, so they gave him some sort of phone or some way to communicate with his family or friends, and they gave him a regular phone. The guy is deaf.
Yeah.
He can't communicate with them.
So there's a couple sides to this story, and then I think the most important part of it is how symbolic it is. Although at the very end, you're going to see what a horrible injustice this was. So on the one hand, I have some sympathy for the officials here, because not only is he deaf and can't easily communicate, but he also has trouble speaking English. Mm-hmm. So you get him an interpreter, and then the interpreter and him can't talk because they're not talking the same language. Although it's actually more relevant for the devices that are in English, because this American Sign Language, you can still communicate. Mm-hmm. All that you could say, well, okay, that's kind of an extraordinary circumstance here, right? But it turns out they didn't get him an interpreter for 6 weeks.
He was in jail for 6 weeks, unable to communicate with people. According to him, he was neglected. He couldn't eat because he didn't know when mealtime was. I mean, that's a complete disaster. And so he has no real way of defending himself, because he also has no way of getting a lawyer because he's unable to communicate with people. Also, he's a homeless Ethiopian guy. The reason why he went to the airport in the first place was because he was looking for a warm place to sleep. And then authorities just snatched him up, and they're like, you fit the description of someone who stole an iPad. Later on, they found out that the iPad wasn't stolen. The owner of the iPad found it.
So now that's the injustice. And they got him to plead guilty to a misdemeanor charge. Why? Partly because they explained to him that if he did that, they'd let him out of jail.
Yeah.
I mean, it's super ironic, right? That they're like, the only way you can leave jail is if you admit to something you didn't do. And he's like, okay, fine, I'm guilty, right? Later they find out the owner of the iPad said, oh, my bad, I found it. It wasn't stolen at all. They tell the prosecutor, and the prosecutor says, no, I'm not dismissing the charges, because a prosecutor is never wrong, even when it's patently obvious that you were wrong. And she says, well, just because it was found doesn't mean it wasn't stolen in the first place.
Get out of here.
Come on, man. Are there no bounds of reason? But to me, more important than any of this is how symbolic this is, right? Okay, come on. First of all, on the injustice, doesn't anybody in the jail go, this dude's been here for 6 weeks, man. He's not communicating with anybody. He's missing his meals. Doesn't anybody ask, did this guy ever see a lawyer? Did this guy ever see an interpreter? Does anybody know why this guy is here? Like, is there no one doing their job, right? But it's symbolic because the powerless in America feel deaf and mute and cannot communicate with the powerful, right? So if you have no power, they put you in prison and they go la 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 la, and they can't hear you, or they don't want to hear you, right? So in essence, for all the people who don't have power in this country, you are this guy. So to relate this to the DEA story that we did earlier in this show, the DEA coming in and taking cash from people that they have on them, not even charging them with a crime, but saying, oh, I seized it in the middle of me trying to find drugs on you. I didn't find the drugs, but I took the money and I put it in my pocket. Why are they able to get away with that so often? So they get $163 million doing that, right? It's because and it's the same part of the same reason why they're hitting racial minorities. They're trying to hit the powerless, right? So if you take money from the powerless, they can't fight back, right? That's why half the time the money's less than $10,000. Some of the time they take it from actual drug dealers. They couldn't find the drugs on them. They don't fight back because they don't want to go and say to the cops, hey, can you give me my drug money back? I know that, right? But a lot of the time, as the evidence indicates, they just take it from people who have no power. And like this guy, they feel like they can't speak back. They have no voice, right? And so the cops get to get away with it. And the only reason they got caught in the DEA case, by the way, was because they hit an African-American woman who happened to be a lawyer for the Pentagon. Okay, so she had power. So she could fight back and expose what happened. So that's why they don't go after the guy who looks really rich. Wait, doesn't it make sense? He might have more money on him.
Exactly.
No, but he's got power, right? That's why the powerless get even more crushed in our society.